what goes up.
Oi, Marie! Oi, Marie!
Deep in the heart of Texas.
The shadow knows.
I bet it's Manischewitz.
No, lady. I buy strictly American.
Time now for spinning my dad's vinyl. Here with all his skips, scratches, and pops is my dad, Frank Vaccarello.
Thanks, sweetie, and thank you for tuning in to episode 179 of Spinning My Dad's Vinyl. I'm not sure the person who gathered the music for this record understood the assignment. This is not at all what I expected the music to sound like after seeing the name of the album and the text on the cover. I mean, who hasn't enjoyed that Latin sound from Guy Lombardo, Billy May, Ray Anthony, and Joe Leahy? A good thing there's a song by Sergio Mendez here to lend the recording some credibility. The closest comparison I can come up with is that the music on this record is light and bouncy, quite like the Latin music my dad and I like so well. So, get ready to hear music from the most inappropriately titled record in my dad's collection so far, in volume 179, Viva the Latin Beat. Billy May and his orchestra with Spanish Flea, written by the husband and wife team of Sissy and Julius Wechter. Of course, that was first recorded by Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass in 1965. Now, according to secondhandsongs.com, Billy May recorded his version in 1966, although that is unverified. Okay, why this record for this episode? Well, as I was laying out the schedule for this season, I thought I needed to inject some of that Latin beat my dad loved to collect at this point. I should have learned my lesson long ago to look closer at these albums I'm unfamiliar with before I make my choice, but I like living with these, quote, mistakes. I learn a whole lot. When I digitized this record, I had to keep looking at the cover to remind myself, yes, it says Latin Beat, right there in purple lettering superimposed over a dark image of a woman holding a pinkish red iris. And while Guy and Billy both do music usually attributed to the Tijuana Brass on this record, I could hardly call most of the music on this album Latin. In fact, I'm not playing two Burt Bacharach and Hal David songs despite being a Bacharach fan. So I wasn't sure at first why they classified most of this music as Latin, especially with such a great list of Latin pop musicians making the charts at the time I think this album came out. Hopefully this episode's interesting side note will shed some light on that question. Part of it, I'm sure, has to do with the record coming from one of Capitol Records' budget labels. You know, I've talked about those in depth in past episodes. It's still pleasant music, and I thought I would share it with you. Speaking of Burt Bacharach, the songs he penned on this album I'm not playing are I Say a Little Prayer, performed by the Sounds of Our Times, and What the World Needs Now is Love, performed by Ray Anthony. But here's Ray's orchestra playing music for this Latin collection with a German song title. Ray Anthony doing his Count Basie imitation there at the end with Dankeschön, written by Bert Kaempfert, Kurt Schwabach, and Milt Gabler. It was made popular with a recording from Wayne Newton in 1963. While I'm not really talking about the orchestra leaders in any detail in this episode, I do want to call out Ray. Ray Anthony was born Raymond Antonini, January 20th, 1922. He is the last surviving member of the orchestra actually led by Glenn Miller. Yes, as of when I wrote this script, surviving. Ray Anthony is 102 years old. All right, let me tell you about my dad's vinyl I have chosen for this episode. Various artists, Viva, on the Creative Products label, which is a sub-label of Capitol Records, number SL6650. It's part of the Capitol Stereo Showcase series. It's a vinyl LP limited edition format. I'm not sure what year this was released, but sometime in the 1970s based on the series name. Its genre is jazz, Latin, and pop. We will hear 7 of the 10 songs on this album. They're pretty short. Now, there are no liner notes. In fact, there's nothing much on the back cover besides a list of the songs and the artists, with each side of the record placed on either side of a basket of daisies. Each artist has a headshot in a line with the others. There's one acknowledgement of album director being Ernest K. Dominy. That's about it. Pretty bland if you ask me. Okay, let's see what prices this record is being sold at on Discogs.com. $7.16 for a high, 40 cents for a low for a 176 average, and $1.25 median. It was last sold on March 17th, 2024 for €6.59, or that $7.16 US high. I found several on eBay for $15 to $20, and I found several on Amazon from $6 to $39. Now, my dad's copy is in fair condition. There's not much noise at all between the tracks. There are a couple of good pops here and there and crackles within the music, especially when the music gets soft. The surface looks pretty clean, as if it didn't get played very much. The cover is in poor condition, mostly because the bottom edge has a small tear in it that allows the record itself to peek through, but not enough to warrant his black electrical tape remedy that he has on so many other album covers. The cover already employed a dark color scheme, so I'm not sure how much duller it got over time. The back cover has the familiar green magic marker streak over the penciled-in words, "Do Side 2. The listed songs A Taste of Honey and A Banda are highlighted. More than 3 years into the show, I'm beginning to realize my dad came along a radio station record collection sometime along the way that he stored away from the main collection, and now they are all mixed together. I wish I had known that and talked to him about that." So I will value my dad's vinyl at $1. Next up, the first we'll hear of the 2 that we'll hear from Joe Leahy. Joe Leahy and his orchestra with Life, written by Joe Leahy and Mike Curb. We'll be hearing from Joe again to close this episode out. Now, we don't have just one artist, and I didn't want to clog up the episode introducing you to so many band leaders, especially when this isn't the music they were popular for. So, we'll move on to 2 from Guy, with music made popular by the TJB. Spinning My Dad's Vinyl. Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians with A Taste of Honey, written by Bobby Scott and Rick Marlowe. Before that was Guy Lombardo with A Banda, written by Chico Barque de Holanda. Both of those appear on different Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass records. Time now for this episode's interesting side note, and it has to do with the most likely explanation of why there is only one Latin musician on this album of Latin Beats. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the recording industry faced criticism for using white musicians to perform genres traditionally associated with non-white cultures, such as Latin music. This practice was part of a broader trend in which the industry capitalized on the popularity of ethnic music styles without authentically representing the cultures from which these styles originated. Specifically, albums like Viva from the Capitol Stereo Showcase series, promoted as featuring a Latin beat, often showcased orchestras led by white musicians rather than genuine Latin artists. Critics of this practice pointed out that it diluted the authenticity and cultural richness of the music. Articles from that era and subsequent analysis highlighted that the recording industry was driven by commercial interests, prioritizing marketability and familiar names over the authentic representation. This often meant that talented Latin musicians, who were more than capable of contributing to such albums, were overlooked in favor of established white musicians who were seen as more palatable to mainstream American audiences. Furthermore, this approach perpetuated stereotypes and contributed to a homogenized version of Latin music that lacked the depth and vibrancy of its roots. Publications like Billboard and Rolling Stone, as well as various music critics, noted the irony and disservice in promoting a genre rich in cultural significance while sidelining the very artists who were its authentic proponents. The trend was a reflection of the broader systemic issues in the music industry, where profit motivates often trumped artistic and cultural authenticity. Okay, I guess that was a polite way of saying it. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's hear music from an actual Latin musician. That was Muito Avantare by Sergio Mendez, who was born February 11th, 1941 in Brazil and very much still kicking it at the age of 83. The song was written by Joe Donato. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. While it wasn't exactly what I was expecting to hear when I read the album cover, it wasn't bad either. Authentic Latin musicians or not, or music for that matter, it certainly was an interesting recording. And now that I think of it, there are plenty of albums in my own personal collection I didn't really look at closely enough when I chose them, usually based on the title, that were later found to be lacking the element I was expecting. Maybe that trait ran in the family? Oh well. We'll let Joe take us out of here with a song that translates into above. Once again, it's the Joe Leahy Orchestra with Arriba, written by Joe Leahy and Mike Curb. And there you have selections from a collection of music masquerading as a popular style and not really doing a very good job of it. So thanks for tuning into Volume 179, Viva the Latin Beat, however you did. If you want more information about this show, head over to spinningmydadsvinyl.com. I'll be back next week with all my skips, scratches, and pops for Volume 180, Hit Makers. Until then, go with the flow, my friends.